Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to him on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel with Blake Silverman on the pin down, you guys absolutely should be. We are coming to you live here on a Sunday morning where there is no Pistons game, there is no Lions game. So hopefully we are your sports entertainment for day. Thank you for joining us. If you are watching live or after the fact, please ratings, reviews, likes, subscriptions, all of that stuff continues to help us grow. So thank you so much for all of your support and continued support to help us do that. Omari, well, before we get going, we have a couple people here. What up, though? Pistons fan, Order of the Blazing Horse. What up, though? A lot of excited fans. I know Michigan got a big win on Saturday. The Lions got the win on Thursday. Pistons got a win over the last couple of days, one not so win. But before we get to that, Omari, Thanksgiving Day, what did it look like for you? What'd you do? What'd you eat? I know people come for the food conversation, so let's get to it.
Yeah, so obviously the Pistons were on the road. We were in Memphis, they played the Grizzlies Wednesday, and I actually flew home like Thanksgiving morning from Memphis, and like the airport, it was like I think Eastern time, like 6:45 a.m. flight. So I got back at like 9 and spent Thanksgiving with the family. We actually did not do turkey this year.
Okay.
We have been, like, my mom had been working in more like Cornish hen instead of the rotation. So, she made a Cornish hen and we had ham and it was good. I don't know where we are as far as turkey. Like I feel like turkey's hard to get right because it's like so lean and there are ways to do it. But I think chicken is better. So we did chicken. And Lions won. It was probably the worst second half. They played all season, but still put it out. Just very typical, just Detroit Thanksgiving, food, Lions. And then I took off the following morning to get back to Indy.
What were the sides?
We did greens. We did dressing, or some people call it stuffing. We did mac and cheese.
Wait, hold on. I've never heard it called dressing. So you call stuffing dressing?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
Yeah. And they may be made slightly different, but they are the same. They serve the same purpose, basically.
Okay.
We had rows. I think we had cornbread. I'm probably forgetting a couple things. I know that they had yams. I'm not a big yams fan, so I did not do yams. And then we had lemon pie, and then we had apple pie. And I think that's everything. So, yeah, pretty good.
So we went to my high school friend Chris's house for Thanksgiving. We drove up Thanksgiving Day. Our kids get car sick, so that was awesome on the drive up. But he made prime rib, cream corn, mashed potatoes, rolls. Like, it was a feast, and it was amazing. So no turkey for us either, Omari. No ham, nothing like that. Really, really good prime rib. I stuffed myself so much, I barely had anything left for the dessert. So we had some good desserts as well. We had some apple pie, some pumpkin pie. They Crumble Cookie does pies, I guess, around Thanksgiving. Yeah. So there was a few assortments of those, a pumpkin roll. Like, we had a bunch of different stuff. So as my family, along with Chris, his wife, their son, and then his mom and dad and one of his brothers. His dad was my high school math teacher and stuff. So obviously, like, all super close. And then we got to go watch a very disgusting win, similar to the Lions win on Thursday. We got to go watch the Chiefs game in person on Friday. So Rowan and my wife and I all went to that game, and then we came home on Saturday. Wes says he had a little more traditional. They had turkey, mashed sweet potatoes. That sounds good. Regular mashed potatoes, corn souffle, beans, peas, rolls, cranberry sauce, and apple crisp. Oh, apple crisp. Are you an apple crisp guy, Omari?
Yeah, I am. I like apple anything when it comes to dessert.
Nice. Yeah, I like it. Sean says, I did not know turkey versus ham was such a divisive issue. Live in Nashville, raised in Michigan, and we do fried turkey down here. Find it. It'll change your life. So I'm just not much of a turkey guy or ham guy, kind of no matter how it's made. Is that where you land on it as well? Like, have you traditionally been turkey in your family?
Yeah, so we usually always do turkey. And I think we started working different meats in, and then at some point we just phased turkey out and nobody complained about it because we were all cool with the other meats. You know what? My mom just texted me because we did have cranberry sauce.
Okay, lit. Oh, I love it.
Okay. Oh yeah, and sweet potatoes. So they did have sweet potatoes too. But like, I like turkey. I've just never, like, if I were to make a turkey, like, I would probably, they say if you cut the spine out and like lay it flat, it cooks faster and it like stays juicy. So I've never made a turkey, but I may try to do that. I've also never had fried turkey or deep fried turkey, but I've always heard deep fried turkey is good. So I probably just haven't had the right turkey preparation, but I can go with pretty much any other meat on Thanksgiving and be happy.
Wes says if he doesn't have turkey, he's upset. Wes loves those afternoon naps after the Thanksgiving lunch. That those hit different than anything else. I love that your mom's correcting you on this during the podcast. So
yeah, I'm coming off 3 games and 4 nights and 4 flights in the past 5 days or something. So I'd legit have to sit here and think about what I ate yesterday or Thursday.
The last thing I want to make note of is my son fell in love with NCAA football over the weekend. He is going to buy himself a PS5. He has enough money. He's going to buy himself the console, and then his grandparents and aunts and all of that will buy him a couple different games and controllers and all that. But Chris, my friend, has a PS5 with the game, and Rowan spent a lot of time playing college football this weekend.
Nice.
and fell in love. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm kind of like, as somebody who was a college football fiend growing up, I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool that he's into it so much. So I enjoy that.
Are you a PS5 or any type of gamer at all, or have you ever been?
No, I was a PS2 or 3. I think it capped at 3 for me, maybe a PS4. But yeah, I mean, college football, I was downloading the games and the rosters before there was NIL, where all of this stuff, where the names are. I loved recruiting and playing dynasties. I was always more of a football gamer than a basketball games never hit the same. College football, loved it. I transitioned a little bit to Madden, then a little bit of NBA and a little bit of baseball. I never got into like Call of Duty or those games, but very much a sports PlayStation kid growing up through college. Even when I first moved home, and then once I started having kids and stuff like that, I just haven't found the time. But I won't lie, I took the controller from him a few times this weekend, Omari, so I could get a few snaps in and relive the glory days.
Hey, well, there you go. Yeah, I definitely played more basketball growing up, like especially once like 2K11 came out. I just purely played 2K. Shiny Pat says, when I moved back to Michigan, I'm making Omari a fried bird first season bet. All right, I'm ready. Shiny Pat, I am ready. My DMs are open. Feel free to reach out, and we will absolutely set that up. But yeah, like I was more so 2K, and I played like Madden here and there. Not college football as much, but I do have college football 25, and like I would say that's probably the game I played the most this year for sure. Like I've been like halfway addicted to it, so I'm obstinate. So Rowan's gonna have a great time. Like I'm definitely a big fan of that game.
Yeah, Wes says he was a football video game guy too. So, and go out play basketball is more fun than 2K. Yeah, I struggled with the basketball. Hey, I'm going to tell you this. Like, I may put some of our high school quarterbacks on the sticks and make them figure out how to read the option. Like, it's so realistic. Like, you have to identify who the option keys are and stuff like that. We're an option high school team, so may do that. But we're 9 minutes in. That's enough nonsense for today. Hopefully people appreciate us giving our, real lives here and there, but I'm sure they tune in for our Detroit Pistons conversation. I do want to start with something you somewhat referenced there about your travel schedule over the last 4 days. And I believe some quotes from JB after Saturday night's game about their travel schedule. I know fans don't want to hear this. I understand it, but can you give some insight into what JB said about the Saturday night game, the travel, and kind of where the team was going into that game against the Sixers, which, flat out, the team didn't perform very well, especially the start of each half. Some insights into that, because I saw some of the quotes, but others may not have.
Yeah, so I'm glad you opened with that, because that was on my mind after last night's game. Obviously, the Pistons they had a surge of energy for like 8 minutes in the second quarter. Beyond that, they just looked completely flat. Philly, I think, led by 17 or 18 in the first quarter, and ended up winning by like 24 or something like that. And then after JB says that they were on the tarmac in Indianapolis the night before, obviously that was the NBA Cup game, or the NBA in-season tournament group play stage game, which we'll talk about later. But, second night of a back-to-back off of essentially what's halfway a playoff game. I mean, there's running up the score late because of the point differential. Like that's not, like you're putting way more effort into a blowout win than you normally would. They said they didn't get back to Detroit till like 4 a.m. So you're not getting home, until like 5 or whatever. And that they were tired basically. And JV just kind of came out and, said that and just, kind of took it on for the team. And nobody wants to hear that. Like, you read mentions after, and it's a mix of people saying, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you get back at 5 a.m., second night of a back-to-back. Yeah, you're going to be tired. And then people saying, it should never matter, play the reserves more. They're millionaires. Who cares? Go out and play. And I'll just say, for one, like the energy aspect, I think does matter. It wasn't just the second night of a back-to-back. It was their third night in 4 games. On top of that, it was their 22nd game. They lead the NBA in games played at 22nd. There are 3 other teams that have played 21. They'll hit 22nd today. And then the rest of the league, there were 26 teams that played 20 games or fewer. So the Pistons have played 2 games more than every other team. Philly that was their 18th game.
I thought my math was wrong when I was like, this team is 9-13 now. That's 22 games. And then I saw the Bucks record. They just played their 19th game last night as the Pistons were playing their 22nd.
Yeah, and Miami had the fewest games, and they had only played 17. So Philly had played 18. So the Pistons had played 4 more games through that stretch. And on top of that, Philly had been off since Wednesday. The Pistons played Wednesday, Thursday, and then, I'm sorry, with Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. So they had an extra game. So long story short, if there's ever a time that there's going to be the team was tired excuse, to me, this is the game where it applies, because you have a 4-game difference, third game in 4 nights against a team coming off of 2 days of rest. Like, that's just a lot kind of working against you. And on top of that, you also didn't have Kate Cunningham. So, there's a such thing as a schedule loss. And to me, that's just a schedule loss. That's not a loss that raised any red flags for me.
So I think if anybody wants to criticize, listen, I realize these guys make a lot of money, Omari. A lot of money, right? Way more than either you or I or Wes. I don't know all of our listeners' financials. I assume most of our listeners as well. So I understand people who say they get paid very handsomely to go out and compete every night. I get it. I understand it. But as M. Wesley 13 says, I work a desk job and can't get anything done if I get less than 7 hours of sleep. So I don't blame these guys for being worn out. I fall there a little bit as well. Like, if I don't get 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep, I get a migraine the next day. Like, I can't function. Now, I'm a little bit older than these guys playing, but I do, it's not their fault they didn't get sleep either. And the one thing I will say is, I mentioned my friend that I went and spent Thanksgiving with. He's a former college athlete. He's a state championship high school coach. He's not one to let professional athletes off the hook, but he watched the Netflix series that's similar to the NFL's quarterbacks, or I don't know what it's called, whatever it was that, followed around a few different players. And the first thing he said to me about it, Omari, was, it's crazy what these guys do travel wise. Like, he had such more of appreciation for what they go through during a season with playing a game, he's like, I just assumed because it was all luxury and private planes and stuff that it was easy. But I mean, we can't say that sleep is such an indicator of health and performance and then not have a little bit of an understanding when these guys don't get sleep and then perform bad. I think the one thing that I may have been disappointed was, that should have been the Marcus Sasser game or the Ron Holland game or somebody like that, where, hey, these guys that aren't playing as many minutes, they come in and they help you win a game because they do have the energy, because they haven't played as much as some of the other guys. I think that was my biggest takeaway more than anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, sleep matters. Sleep matters. We all know it matters. Anybody who has ever gotten less than 5 hours of sleep, not to function the next day, know it matters, unless you're in that rare group of people who can function off of 4 hours of sleep. I can't, even just this past trip, I'm working till, 11 p.m. a lot of times. So I fall asleep till well past midnight, waking up at, 5 in the morning a lot of times to get to practice the next day. So sometimes I'm sitting down, writing a story, and the words are coming to me if I'm going off with 4.5 hours of sleep. That's just reality, and I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not up there, I'm not out there doing what they're doing. So, we don't, long story short, it matters. I don't know how else to say, it matters. You can't buy sleep. That's the one thing where if you don't get it, you just don't have it. And when you also just couple that with the game disparity and the Sixers having, 2 days of rest when they're playing their third game in 4 nights, the word schedule loss matters for a reason. And then you throw no Kate on top of that. And to me, that's a nothing burger of a loss. We'll see how they come out against the Bucks on Tuesday.
I mean, I think the fact that JB came out and said, can you pull up the exact quote just for those that maybe didn't see it? Because I think that's what really stood out to me. So I got a little behind. I didn't watch the Friday night game until Saturday afternoon when I got home with my family. And then I was a little behind on the Saturday night game. And So I'd already kind of knew what had happened before I started watching. But in my notes, the rotation goes 11 deep in the first quarter without Cade. Sasser gets an early rotation. Wendell Moore Jr. gets an early rotation. I think Paul Reed got in the first quarter, if not early in the second quarter. And I was like, okay, is this all about energy? But after the JB quote after the game, I think JB knew what was going to happen. And that's why he kind of had the rotation that he did. Now, there was some stuff where it's like, okay, like Ivy still, I thought, had decent energy. I think you could tell he was tired with how many threes he was taking early in the game. Like that stood out to me. You would still like to see some guys play with a little more energy at least. But I think JB knew going into the game. And as I mentioned, and as Shawnee Pat says, like, that really seemed like a game for Wendell Moore, Marcus Sasser, Paul Reed. Like, hey, you guys go in and ball out and see if you can still us a victory here. Do you have the official JB quote that you tweeted out?
Yeah, it's right here. He said, our guys were exhausted. We sat on the runway last night until 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, got home at 4 o'clock in the morning in a snowstorm, drove home. By the time they got to bed, it was 5:30. I thought they went out and they dug down. They tried to give it what they had. We just didn't have it tonight, and that's fair. They tried, but today was just a rough day for them.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, what was crazy was they had it within 5 at halftime. Like they gave themselves a chance. And okay, so here's one as well. Order of the Blazing Horse. We got to see Asar go from the 5 to the 1 with the single substitution. That was pretty cool. I did think that was my takeaway from this game is we saw a lot of Asar. We got to see some of the potential things he could do. We saw some interesting lineups as mentioned with Asar at the 5. So it would have been nice to see them find a way to win. At the end of the day, like the Sixers were the more talented team at the top there, right? Paul George and Tyrese Maxey are better than Jaden Ivey and whoever the second best player was for the Pistons right now, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Tyrese Maxey has been one of the best guards in the NBA, for his third year now. But he was electric last night. Yeah, there absolutely was a talent disparity at the top without Cade.
Yeah, and so that's what I took away. When I thought Paul George didn't play in the game, I was like, man, this is probably still... Now, the other argument is they play without a center for most of the game and all of that. But yeah, maybe I'm too quick, Omari, to look at the big picture, like continue to look at the big picture. And like, even after that game, they just came off their best performance on Friday night where Cade and Ivy looked awesome playing together. They dominated a Pacers team. And they're even 9-13, what 32, 33 win pace. Yeah. That's above my expectations. Maybe that's where I stay positive is this team is still well above. I think well above is fair, at least for me, what my expectations were. And again, they do it behind the two players that I think were most important. So I don't know. Like my vibes continue to be good, even if I find individual things to critique within a game. I'll lead us into break with this. What I do think is important is after that and kind of making this excuse, however you want to call it an excuse, however you want to use that term, they get 2 days off. I assume they'll be healthy. Cade will be back. Asar's had more time. And they have a huge game on Tuesday with 2 days off. If they don't perform Tuesday, I think that's the game to critique. It's not this game on Saturday. That's how I feel. I'll get your thoughts on this after this break.
All right, we're back with segment 2. Yeah, as you mentioned, the team is on, I believe, a 34-win pace after last night. They've hovered between 32 and 35 wins, pace-wise for the last week and a half, 2 weeks, essentially. I think we saw some of the same reaction after last night's loss as we did after they lost to Memphis, right? Like, this team just doesn't have this and that. And then they come out on the road against a healthy Pacers team and just, whop them, like the NBA Cup game. And then the next night, they kind of go back to having low energy. And, to me, they've just followed, predictable patterns, for the most part. When they've had a game that they needed to show up for, they've shown up. This is a team that's out of 22 games, they've probably had at least 10 of those decided by margins of 4 points or fewer. And it's still so early in the season. We still have 60 games left. And, that's one thing I try to keep in mind as well, is that in some ways, the NBA season doesn't even truly get going until Christmas, because sometimes you have teams that start cold and then they heat up. Sometimes you have teams that start pretty good and then they fall off. And typically by Christmas, you have a good idea of what's real and what's not. So, we're just now a fourth of the way through the season. I think by and large, if you're looking at what you wanted to see this team accomplish this season, like right now, they are on pace to do that in a lot of ways. I mean, even just defensively, right? Like even after a slip that they've had over the past, 6 games, they're still like 13th, right? Like they've been not great defensively for over a week and they're still in the top half. Like there's been a lot of measurable growth, I think, early on.
So, I mean, let's look at the season. They started out the season with 4 straight losses, Omari. Lose that game to Miami. I believe that was the Tyler Hero go crazy game. And then they come back and get a win. They followed that win off with the blowout loss to the Knicks, right? The first real stinker of the season. They follow that up with what? 2 wins. One over the Nets, who actually are a decent team, and then a really nice win over the Lakers. The next time I feel like, you have they have the Milwaukee Bucks overtime loss. So they play back-to-back overtime games, the one over the Heat. So they lost to the Rockets, beat the Heat, and then the tough one to the Bucks. They follow that up with what? 2 wins, one over the Raptors, one over the Wizards. They then lose 3 straight, including an overtime to the Hornets, and then the Magic loss. What do they follow it up with? A win. Then they get blown out by the Grizzlies. What do they follow it up with? The best performance of the season. Like, to me, this is kind of what you want to see from a team. They're not great. Like, I'm not thinking this team is a top 6 team, even in a really bad East. I just want to see this team grow and improve and show things they didn't show last year, which is bouncing back from adversity. And we've seen them do that consistently. I guess sometimes I will never tell people how to fan how you want. I guess sometimes I don't understand how you could have watched this team lose 28 straight games last year, never overcome adversity, and not be a little bit encouraged by what we've seen so far this year when a team does lay an egg, which all teams are going to do. Every team is going to lay an egg in the NBA, Omari.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, if they get blown out, like in Indiana, like with Cade, and then you're kind of riding this like streak of awful basketball going into that last season tournament game. That's a different thing. But they got Cade back. Memphis was one of the worst games of the season, like bar none. I don't even know what to talk about for that game, to be honest with you. But again, they come in Indiana and they just completely handle this team. They did what Indiana did to them a year ago when they were running up the score. Again, in Indiana, but except this time the Pistons did it on the road. K came out, still had a few speedy turnovers, but otherwise he did exactly what you wanted from him. J.I. had a fantastic night. I thought Tobias Harris had one of his better games. I think he had 16 points on 8 shots, just playing within himself. Like you're seeing bounce back. Like that's the word right there is bounce back. You're seeing this team be able to come off of a bad performance and just come off of it, like just move on and come in with a new mindset, which we did not see them do at all last season. You could tell, especially I think that Indiana loss last year was like their 13th straight loss. So like they were only halfway through the losing streak at this point last year. Like they still had a whole nother month of losing before they would eventually snap that streak. So
it was so easy to figure out their record last year because it was 2 plus whatever the losing streak was. Like I think it was 3 plus. Yeah, 2 they were 2-1 when the losing streak started. It was just so much easier. I always get confused on what their record is because it's like, man, these numbers are consistently changing. I think it's unfair to expect too much consistency from this, as Wes mentioned, this young team, a team that's just been put together with new additions, a new coach. I mean, the only thing that was consistent about last year was they sucked. Like that was the only thing consistent was they were not going to play well and they were going to lose most of their games. So a little bit of inconsistency personally, again, I'm not telling other people how to have their expectations or fan, but for me, I'm okay with a little bit of inconsistency if they bounce back. And that's why I think Tuesday is a fascinating game because they didn't play well last night. It wasn't great. And Omari, is it hyperbole to say this is the biggest Pistons game in the last 4 or 5 seasons? I mean, what other game has mattered this much over the last 4 or 5 seasons?
Couldn't even tell you.
There isn't, right?
Maybe that Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Summer League game.
Yeah. Okay, exactly. Exactly my point. That was the most anticipated game.
Or Asar and his brother, so yeah.
I mean, for real, like, this game truly means something. When was the last time we got to sit down and evaluate a Pistons game that actually meant, like, this game matters for you can go win a regular season championship? Like, people can value that however they want, but it means something to the players. It's for money because if you win the NBA Cup, you make more money. This game truly matters. And we haven't watched a game like that where the win-loss and the result truly mattered as much as this one does. Not in the time that I've covered the team and talked about the team. I'm excited. Like, I don't care whether they win or lose necessarily, win or lose, but I'm excited to see how they perform in this situation.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about the NBA Cup, and I actually wrote about it, after they beat the Pacers, is that this time last year, like, it was not on the radar for the Pistons at all. Like, you were trying to stop this losing streak, and it just was not. It might have been a conversation for like the first game before things really went off the rails. But like by the time you got to the stage and you had lost 14, 15 straight, it was just not a conversation, right? Like you had bigger issues to solve. And now you have a chance to hang like an actual banner, like I know everybody kind of crack jokes about the Lakers hanging the banner with all the other championships and, this and that. But like, let's say Indiana had like one, and they're hanging a banner last season. Now you have a Pistons team that hasn't hung anything. Like, we have people listening to the pod probably who have not been alive for like a Pistons championship. Like, I have to keep that in mind sometimes when I'm on Twitter. Like, like we're coming up on like, 21 years, like we have people who are in college who have not been alive for a championship. So they don't, like, they've never seen anything. Like, this is genuine excitement for them. It's excitement for the players who could have like this physical marker and reminder of, the growth they've shown from last year. Malik Beasley's been talking about Vegas. Like, he's excited to get the guys, just to have that, trip to Vegas and, perform in that environment. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like the Cup is like, it matters for teams like the Pistons who have something to prove, who want early season momentum and want some marker of, hey, like we're here, like we're arriving and, we're turning the page, right? So, like there's some excitement. Like you see people on Twitter talking about Tuesday, like, it's something that people are genuinely paying attention to. And if the Pistons continue to win, I think we're going to continue to see that hype build more and more.
Well, I think what it does, it gives us a chance to evaluate these players in a different scenario, right? Like what does Cade Cunningham look like in a game like this? What does J.I. look like in a game like this?
Yeah.
We can evaluate JB in a different light in a game like this. It was really hard to evaluate JB on Saturday night without Cade Cunningham trying to play 12 dudes when his team's energy is low. What is his coaching going to be late in a game? Wes puts in the outline. What do they have to do to actually beat the Bucks? So to remind everybody, in the previous Bucks game, they had no Jaden Ivey. They had no Tim Hardaway Jr. The Bucks did not have Damian Lillard in that game. So like that is important to note as well from that one. Cade had 35 on 34 shots. Beasley had 26, including 8 threes in that game. We had 25 minutes from Sasser and 23 minutes from Wendell Moore Jr. and 8 minutes from Paul Reed in that game. This was an overtime game. Giannis had 59 and Brook Lopez had 29 with 5 made threes and 5 blocks. So what do you think is the most important thing for the Pistons going into this matchup with the Bucks? Is it stopping Giannis? Is it stopping Brook Lopez? Is it figuring out how to be more efficient around the rim where I feel like Brook Lopez really dominated? What are your thoughts going into this game, just the Pistons' chances and what they need to do?
Yeah. The funny thing about Giannis scoring 59 is that it was clear after like the first quarter that he was going to get at least 50. Like it was just that type of night for him. And they were still winning. The game didn't turn until everybody else started making shots. Like Brook Lopez got a couple to fall. And then, like it was game over at that point. Like Giannis already has 40, now Brook's knocking down shots. And now everybody else is getting involved because the floor is wide open. So, like, I thought they had a formula in that game, right? Do what you can against Giannis, but don't overcommit. Try to keep everybody else out of it. And, maybe you have to adjust your scheme against Brook Lopez so that he's not getting, like, wide open threes, like probably the most open threes he's got last season. We're in that game, and you just absolutely can't have that happen. That's really just the key adjustment, I think, from the first game. It's just, don't allow him to get comfortable. If you can contain Giannis to the extent you can, but even if he scores 50 and, you could still, maintain a lead. And this is a Milwaukee team that's gotten hot too, as you mentioned. So it's not the exact same game, but I would still follow that to the extent that you can. Because the reality is that with Dame now, I mean, you're going to have to pick your poison one way or another. So classic strategy. Stars are going to get theirs. Just keep everybody else out of it.
Yeah, this one will be interesting. So just looking through some of my notes, they were up 18 during some portion of this game, I think in the third quarter. And then the Bucks got it down to 9 midway through I think that was one thing in the Pacers game that was really stood out to me was they were able to keep a lead throughout the game. Anytime that Indiana started to make a run, Detroit was able to like stop it and all of that. Remember, this was the game Isaiah Stewart got ejected as well because of the Giannis. I think he pulled Giannis down from behind on an attempt at the rim. They also like gave up a 25-point swing and then still made the comeback to force overtime. Obviously, we remember the Ron Holland missed free throws and all of that. Also, one thing I want to note here, they lost the Giannis minutes in the third quarter. So that's something to track in this game as well. Can they win the non-Giannis minutes? And Jalen Duren actually started on Giannis in that game, and Tobias Harris started on Brook Lopez. And something to note from the Pacers game was they actually started hard hedging with Jalen Duren in the Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner, ball screen, pick and pop situations. So just for Pistons fans, watch early. What are the matchups and how are they defending the Brook Lopez pick and pop situations? I don't know that they have the matchup to really stop Giannis anyway, to your point, Omari, but can you slow down Dame? Can you slow down Brook Lopez?
Yeah. No, that's really it. Fake Omari alert. Hello, my dad is in the chat. What's up, Dad? Yeah, I mean, and it'll be curious to see. I mean, this is definitely going to be one of the more talented teams they've played up until this point. Like, this is not the same Milwaukee team they played previously. So, like defensively, that's going to be a challenge. Like, Duren and Isaiah Stewart, are probably going to, have chances against Giannis. I think they both have to be on their A game. And we've seen Isaiah have some good games defensively against Giannis. I mean, Giannis is the type of guy where you're just not going to lock him down, but that might be a key night for Isaiah to just, play one of his better games. We may have to we may see JB lean on two bigs a bit more, depending on matchups. It'll be a little bit of a chess match. Like, defensively, I'm curious to see how they go about things. You have a star back too, so, that could also potentially give you an option against Dame as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what they do. That was one reason I thought the Stu ejection was impactful in that first game, because I think Stu is one of the better matchups for Giannis. A star could be a Giannis or a Dame matchup, or maybe you can put matchups together between Giannis and Dame where you can switch things easier or whatever. I mean, when's the last time we got to talk about a regular season matchup like this, because it actually mattered and it was kind of fun because Detroit has the different combinations. And then the other thing is, what does Milwaukee do? How do they guard Cade Cunningham in this game? Andre Jackson Jr. probably takes that matchup. Do they have anybody to guard Jaden Ivey? Jaden Ivey should cook Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
As good as Dame is offensively, he cannot stay in front of Ivey. But here's the problem, and this is what happened in that game. The Bucks are 7th in the NBA in blocks. So when Cade and J.I. get in there, pay attention to, are they able to figure out the finishes? Do they go to the floaters, or do they continue to try to attack Brook Lopez and get blocked? A couple other things with the Bucks. Not a very good offensive rebounding team. So Detroit should be able to limit them on the boards. That would be huge, right? Is keeping them off the boards. We've seen them not do well against the elite offensive rebounding teams in the NBA. The Bucks are not that. And then you mentioned, like, okay, can you keep Taurean Prince, Gary Trent Jr., who's all of a sudden shooting the three ball better, AJ Green, who's been inserted into the lineup? You got to make sure you close out to those shooters, Omari, or that's where they really start to hurt you when Giannis gets 35, Dame gets 25, and those guys hit 10, 11 threes.
Yeah. What Gary Trent, I think he had like 15 in the second half or something. And like once he got going, like again, you just see the effect of all the shooters they have and all the different ways that they can hurt you. I feel like this may just be, maybe I'm just misremembering, but I feel like the Pistons typically have played Milwaukee like somewhat well in the past, just in general. Like I remember they went to Milwaukee and beat them a couple of years ago, like right after New Year's, and Isaiah Stewart played pretty well. So this is obviously their biggest game of the season, right? Like it'll have implications for, cup seeding and everything else, but it's also a game against a team that, they have shown that they could like rise up and play against pretty well. Like it's just some teams that they just tend to have wacky games against, and Milwaukee's not one of those teams. So if you're superstitious at all, like that, I think matters as well.
So one last thing here before we move on. Kyle says, that's why I think point differential should be capped at 12 or 15 in any NBA Cup game. Your thoughts on that, just in general, not for the Pistons specifically, but Kyle was referencing when you mentioned that Detroit was trying to blow the Pacers out by as much as they could. I found this interesting that the NBA hasn't capped it at a number. I assume it's to eliminate potential ties, because if you put it at 15 and multiple teams do 15, over 15, whatever, it's a lot easier to end up with a tie than any random number. But I think this makes sense to me. For reference, Omari, in our high school playoffs, this is what we use. It's plus or minus 21. So you can beat a team by 50, but you only get plus 21. Or you can lose by 50, but you only get minus 21. I do think this is something the NBA should consider for the NBA Cup games.
Yeah, I think eventually, that probably becomes more of a conversation as we see how these things play out. Like right now, I don't think it's like a huge deal, because a lot of it is just one dependent on how the games go. Like you may have years where it matters a lot. You may have years where it doesn't matter at all. But like two, like there just aren't so many scenarios in sports where you are incentivized to run up the score like that.
Yeah.
And I think there's like a fun factor to it. Like you see how mad it makes players like at the end of games. Like it's kind of fun. I don't know. Like it's a dose of chaos in a time of year where you don't usually get chaos. So I'm kind of for not having a point differential at this point. Well, point cap, I mean, yeah.
I really struggle because for whatever reason, one of my things as a coach has always been winning the right way and losing the right way. Like I've probably got in more arguments with opposing teams' coaches over either how they've handled kicking our butts or how they've handled us kicking their butts. Because a lot of times whenever we're beating somebody bad, like let's say we get up by 50 in a football game, we'll take our guys out and then they leave their dudes in. And then they start like kicking onside kicks and stuff. Like I've taken kids out of a basketball game up by 30, and then the other team starts pressing my JV. And so I get very frustrated with how coaches handle the end of games. Like I am kind of a jerk when it comes to that stuff. So I struggle because I would not be able to run up the score on somebody. I think I want to handle the end of a game situation the right way, quote unquote, no matter what the scenario, and not having that cap kind of makes it interesting.
All I would say is that like I get it, but the thing is, the other team wouldn't hesitate to do it to you. So that's like the chaos of it.
I get it. I understand. And as Wes says, I bet you loved the college football on Saturday. I better not. Like, which way was it? Michigan tried to plant a flag on Ohio State's midfield. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
And then it caused a fight.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll refrain. I better not. Okay, so we have some questions in the chat. We also have some pretty interesting topics that Wes put in the outline. We'll get to those. Omari, do whatever you want. You can go to the questions from the chat or you can go to those storylines, but we'll get to those right after this.
All right. We are back with segment 3. We do have a couple questions here. We could probably dive into some of the questions first so that we can get to our topics at the end just to make sure we're able to get through them.
Hold on real quick. Eli says, Bryce, we got snow on the ground, so no more lawn mowing picks, sadly, but it was fun. Eli, this is the great thing about living in North America. As I teach my students, we're seasonal, my guys. So we know it's going to come back around. We got to live through it for a few months, and then we can all start showing off our beautiful lawns here a few months from now. But yeah, it sounds like we got to live with the snow here for a little bit.
Is that like what, like, do you actually get excited for like the spring lawn care when it gets cold outside and you have to like retire from the lawn for a few months? Like, do you look forward to that in like March and April?
For it to come back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like taking care of it. I mean, I worry about my lawn all winter because it like snows and the kids play on the snow and they stomp on the grass. And like right after this, I'm going to go put up this huge Grinch, like air, whatever thing. And it kind of disrupts my, like, so I freak out about my grass all winter staying nice and looking good and how it's going to come out of the winter months to look good in the spring. But then I do get excited about being able to take care. It's therapeutic. I enjoy it. It's relaxing for me.
I'll save that for another day. my dad, Omari, Sankofa OG. Do either of you think the Pistons should attempt to lock down Malik, offer him guaranteed Hardaway type money ahead of free agency? Parentheses, not that he would accept. So the thing about the 1-year deal is that they wouldn't really be able to, I don't think they could negotiate truly until, the offseason. Like he's already on the team. So obviously that, that gives you leverage. But I would expect Malik, like, especially if he keeps shooting the way he has, he would eventually go out and like want to test the market, especially with the Pistons having to negotiate some stuff with Ivy and Duran, and they've got some decisions coming up. If I'm Malik, I'm probably going to test the market, and then you could always come back to the table if the Pistons do want to, pay a bigger amount of money. But off a 1-year deal, he's probably going to test the market.
Yeah, I mean, I wish they could. I would love for them to keep. I mean, I think what we've seen from Beasley, which at times is decent defensively, at times not great defensively, but the floor spacing is real. And I mean, we've had a pretty good sample size of Malik Beasley being one of the best floor spacers in the NBA for a couple years now. And the years earlier in his career, he shot the ball as well, but he's averaging the most attempts of his career, and he's shooting at 40% after 41% last year. I mean, I'll spoil it a little bit. We're doing awards on Game Theory this afternoon. I will bring up Malik Beasley as a 6th man of the year candidate. I don't know that he is the 6th man of the year, but I think he's at least in the conversation. He's 5th in the NBA in scoring, in bench scoring. So that eliminates the games where he has started, I believe, 7 games. So that's only the 15 games where he didn't start, and his numbers are better whenever you look at it overall. So I think he's had a really, really good year. I think it would be great. And if they do lose him, you have to replace him with someone that has similar type of gravity as a floor spacer.
Yeah. And I'll say it's still so far away from his free agency that, I don't want anybody to take it as a report Malik Beasley is going to test free agency. Like, there's still a lot that's going to play out until we get to that point, but yeah, I'm looking at his numbers right now. He's averaging 16 points. He's shooting 44% overall, 39.9% from three. Like, he's the best shooter the Pistons have had in a while. And if he sustains this or anything close to it, especially if he's, jailed with this locker room and how much guys like him. Yeah, like, maybe there is a world where Trajan goes into the offseason and he's like, we're going to keep Malik Beasley here. Like, he's an important part of our core, and, and he's here. Like, we might as well just keep him. So that's something that I'll be curious to see how it plays out, over the course of the year going into the offseason, because he's been huge for this team, obviously.
Well, he just crushed the franchise record for threes made in a month.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was crazy. Okay, this one from Shawnee Pat, essentially asking, how does the front office do the deadline? He was talking about, wanting improvement, making the play-in would be a huge step forward, and asked specifically here, if they tried to add at the deadline, who do you guys like as a target? Think a bottom team expiring is particularly interesting. So I know we're a little bit away, but these conversations are going to start becoming more and more real, Omari. What are our thoughts about how the front office could handle the deadline right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to how they continue to play, right? Like, if you're still in the play-in, or playoff conversation, which those things are kind of the same right now because there's like 5 good teams in the East, maybe. Again, I think we're still like a ways away from truly knowing where this team's going to be at that point. But if you have a chance to be a good team, if Ivy, Cade continue to play, as well as they have, you're still getting red hot shooting from Beasley. They're still a top 13-ish defensive team. Maybe you go into the deadline like, hey, we're going to take a swing for somebody. So again, like I just think it's too early to really predict what they're going to prioritize. But at their current pace, I think you probably do look at having that conversation around the trade deadline if you're within these 500 and realistically could make it to the second round of the playoffs, like what Indiana did last year, right, with Pascal Siakam.
The only addition I would want to see is like a real addition, like a big time addition, and it has to be the right guy. Like, I think it's scary to shoot your shot this early and this quickly, but if you feel like you have a real good handle on what option is Cade, what option is J.I., what option is Asar, Ron, etc., and you think you can bring in the guy that fits perfectly with all of that, then okay. Like, if Trajan thinks he has that figured out, I would be for it. I guess I would be okay with the small move, like was mentioned, maybe somebody that a team's trying to sell on low, a young player, something like that, another wing floor spacer. The selling thing is, I think, what is harder in terms of like, I don't want to sell Malik Beasley if they are in the play-in race. And then but I think it depends on, you have the conversation. Malik, what are our chances of actually bringing you back this offseason? If they're low, I don't want them to just lose him for nothing when you could trade him to a contender and get some real value back. So as you mentioned, I think we're still a little bit away from knowing exactly, okay, how does the Jaden Ivey thing look? How does Asar look? What's his role going to be, et cetera, before you kind of realize and figure out what you actually need in that situation. So I want to get to some of these questions that Wes had in the outline. What has been your biggest surprise this season through 22 games? Can be good or bad.
Biggest surprise is the defense. You know, I think you expect some improvement just from guys getting older, and but I think with that, for them to be top 10 until they had their recent slip, and I think with them getting some real rest. I mean, they're off today. This is December 1st. They're off December 2nd. They have a back-to-back, and then they have 2 more days off. Before they play New York this weekend. Like, that's like some actual rest. And we kind of talked to JB about it, but he did mention that some of the slippage he thought was just from the fact that, like, I asked him about it, they haven't been able to practice, like they've been having rest days in between games because they've had so much travel. And like we talked about earlier, like, they lead the NBA in games played. So he said some of that defensive slippage was just from them not having time to just, go through reps and tighten stuff up in practice. We could see them eventually creep back up to being in that top 10 range, which if they do, that's the biggest surprise. Like, that's the area of growth that was the most important for them. And they've made this leap without making any significant roster adjustments, right? Like, most of the vets you brought in really are giving you a lot more on offense than defense. So they're just doing this off of scheme and effort and just individual improvement. And I think that's been the most impressive aspect of the season so far.
I think the defense as well. Like, I would be crazy not to say that based on what I thought before the season. More specifically, I think the rim protection has been one of the biggest things where Cade's at almost a block. I mean, as much as we talk about Jalen Duren's defense, he is blocking more shots this season. He's at 1.3. Stu has been awesome. We've seen already in limited minutes what Asar could provide there. Tobias has been disruptive. So I think just like the rim protection, specifically the block shots. I think the other good thing is, listen, I expected Cade to be really good this year, but I love that we're seeing him being that well-rounded player. I don't even know that I expected this. He's at almost 24, 9, and 7, Omari. 24, 9, and 7. Again, I don't think Sam or the other person over at Game Theory listen to this, so this won't ruin them. So please, nobody tweet this out. There's only 3 players that average 7 rebounds and 9 assists. You know who the other 2 are? Nikola Jokic and LeBron James. He is in very good company with the numbers he's putting up, and he took a stride defensively. So I think he's been awesome and made great strides. Bad-wise, the vet shooting. Tobias Harris at 31%, Fontecchio at 34%, Isaiah Stewart at 21% and not shooting at all. I think that's probably been the biggest negative surprise. Is I would not have guessed those guys were shooting as bad from 3 as what they are. So those would be my answers. The next one, I kind of mentioned this with Cade. I have a different answer as well. How do you think has taken the biggest leap?
I would go Jaden Ivey. I think he's doing a lot of this stuff that we got to talk about more theoretically, and that he had did in spurts, but not with consistency. And like, that's what he's been, through 20 games has been consistent. He is shooting 45% overall, 38.3% from 3. The 3-point shooting has looked legit since preseason, and nothing since then has happened to change my mind or really anyone's mind, that he's made a genuine leap in that aspect. You talk so much about him fitting with Cade Cunningham, the shooting being a key part of that. Like, it seems like he's figured that out, and that's just had a strong effect on his game throughout. He's finishing a little bit better, inside of the arc. I don't know where he ends up being, like, I guess, threat-wise on the team, but he's grown into a truly above-average scorer this season. And I think the defense has been a bit better as well. So I would say J.I. personally.
Yeah, I don't need to repeat everything you said. J.I. was my answer also. I think the defense is somewhat inconsistent, but when it's good, it's better than anything we've seen. And even when it's not good, it's still better than what we've seen at times. You mentioned all the percentages. We're getting dangerously close to a sample size that we can believe in with the 3-point shooting. It's only 21 games, but it's 5 attempts a game. Even on his career at this point, Omari, he's at 35% on almost 5 attempts. So even if you want to go the complete sample size of almost 1,000 attempts, I shouldn't say almost, 825 attempts, like, that's starting to be somewhat positive. Free throw percentage, wish it was a little better, but averaging the most rebounds of his career. The offensive rebounding continues to be impactful. Turnovers are probably the biggest area. He's averaging a steal a game. I just think he's gotten a whole lot better this season. So that's the answer for me as well. which could lead into the answer of this next question. Who has earned themselves the most money this offseason?
So I would say, well, part of me wants to say Malik Beasley. I guess some of that's like relative to like what you're making this season. J.I., if you're looking at his extension numbers, if he maintains what he's doing now, that's certainly going up from what it would have been at this point a year ago. That's something that will become a much bigger topic as the year goes on. And that depends on, where he takes his game from here, obviously. But you probably look at giving him a pretty, decent bump next offseason if he's going into his year, I think he's 22 now, year 23 season, year 24 season, on a clear upward trajectory. So he's in there. And you have to like take Isaiah out because he already signed and Cade out because he already signed. I think once you look at the rest of the guys who are going to sign, J.I. probably tops that list.
Yep, I'm with you. Those were the two answers for me as well. I don't know that Beasley's number is going to be crazy, but I think he's going to earn a multi-year thing if he continues to shoot this way.
Yeah.
J.I. was the other one. Buy-in says, will Ivy accept less than the max this offseason? I don't think the Pistons should offer him the max based off what we've seen thus far.
Yeah.
I'll give you a reference. Franz Wagner, who everybody questioned whether he should get the max from the Magic, averaged 20 a game last year with 5 rebounds, 4 assists, better defender, bigger on 48. He did have a down year shooting from 3, 85%. Like Franz is better than Jaden Ivey. And so, yet Arthur Cisse says Jalen Green.
That's what I was going to mention. You signed for less than the max and for fewer years than people expected.
Yeah. So Jalen Suggs was another name. Looking at Orlando, he signed for 5,150, but it's decreasing. So Suggs's will start at 35 next year and then be down below 27 in 29-30, which will be a hell of a contract by the time they get to the end of that. What was Jalen Green's? I know people always talk about it being, I don't remember the actual 3 years, 106.
So he's making about 35 a year.
Yeah. So like it's just, with a player option on the end of it, I think unless the growth goes even more, I think that's more of the range you're in for Jaden Ivey. I do not think he is a max player based off what we've seen right now.
No, I don't think he is. And the way the market's been going, like, teams were just not offering that, for guys unless they've shown that they could definitely be like a number 1 or number 2 type of player. J.I. is having a really good season and, based on the way the market's going so far, maybe even accounting for a little bit more inflation, you're probably looking at somewhere in that Jalen Green, Franz Wagner tier of extension, which like I still think is like a great contract for him. But yeah, I would be surprised if it got to the max territory.
Yeah, the thing is, if you put him on the max, I think he has to be your second best player, and I'm not completely sold J.I. can be your second best player. I think he's proven he can play with Cade. I think he could be your third best player or third option or however you want to say it, but you got to save that second max slot for the other guy that's going to come in and get you 28 to 30 a night next to Cade. Or, I mean, we can quibble on some of that, but
yeah, Şengün is making 37 a year over 5 years. Like to me, Şengün is like the top end. Beyond that, you're probably looking at less than that.
Yeah, I think, and that's with him continuing this all year. I mean, I think the numbers have to stay at 18, 4-4 with a steal, 38% from 3. Like the defense continuing to look good. We're only 22 games into that, so we have to continue to see it and make sure it. Come say hello.
Hey, what's up?
So that's my daughter. Okay, Royce. Both of them get in here. Okay.
What's up, Royce? You
guys go play. He needed his Chiefs outfit to go play some football outside. We'll finish with these couple. YouTube user asks, can I get your guys' opinion as a player about dirty play with Stewart pulling Giannis out of the air by his jersey dirty and deserved eject? Here's what I'll say. Anything that happens to a player in the air, I'm cool with whatever the punishment is, because nothing made me more upset than whenever somebody undercut me in the air. Because I didn't elevate a lot, but I could get up a little bit. There's nothing scary. There's never been a scarier feeling in my life than getting undercut, Omari. So I don't mind physical play. I don't even mind kind of the enforcer players. The other thing is I'm just tired of Stu making silly fouls that actually end up hurting the team in the long run. That's probably my biggest thing about that play and even some others. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you just can't pull people out the air. I don't know what else to say beyond that. Like, whether it's dirty or not, I don't know if it's dirty, but you just can't do that. I think you have to come down pretty hard on that just to protect guys' safety.
Yeah, I'm more okay with like the kind of shoulder check, running full speed, but they're on the ground and you just kind of try to get a physical foul, or you grab them and just hold it. Like anything in the air is terrifying to me, and I hate seeing it. Last one from Tweet House. Bryce have a circle date for when his first mow will be. I try not to do it too early because my first mow, I like cut it really, really low to get some of the dead stuff out of the way. And I don't like doing that and then having there be a freeze. So I let my lawns actually stay long all winter to deal with kids playing football during the winter. And when it first comes out, or a late freeze or something like that. So I try to wait till I make sure there's not going to be another freeze.
Where are you on like mulch? My mom said most leaves are great for the lawn free fertilizer.
I do not mulch. I bag everything. My lawn, if I mulch, I'd have to double mow or mow every couple of days because it's so thick that it would leave the mulch, like it would look bad, I guess is my point. Like you would see it all over.
So you get like a lot of leaves.
No, not leaves. Just a lot of grass.
Or just like grass.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
No,
grass.
There is no tree in my yard because I refuse to mow leaves. I hate it. We do not have trees. Plus, my parents planted trees in my quote unquote football field whenever I was a kid, and it pissed me off because I used to have this long stretch where I could run around and play football, and then my dad plants these trees right in the middle of it. I'm like, now I can't run around as much as what I wanted. So no trees in my yard.
Is that what pushed you toward basketball? Like you couldn't develop football?
Honestly, yes. That part, I believe part of why I fell in love with basketball is it's the easiest sport to go play by yourself, right? Like it's a little bit hard to play football by yourself. It's a little bit hard to play baseball by yourself. Basketball, you can go shoot jumpers for as long as you want and you need nobody else. And so, one, I was better at that sport than other things, but that was a big part of it. So
he was playing the long game. He's like, I don't want my son playing football. I'm going to plant these trees and make him hit the court.
Yeah, maybe so. Shawnee says, thanks, Bryce and Omari. Look forward to this every week. Appreciate all y'all do to cover the team. What up, though? Thank you. Thank you to everybody who joined live, who rates, reviews, likes, subscribes, shares, et cetera, joins in the chat. I still think we have one of the best chats there is. We appreciate your guys' comments, whether you agree or don't agree. We keep it clean. We keep it nice. All of that. We thank you guys so much. We'll be back a week from now, hopefully talking about some more NBA Cup stuff. YouTube user with the thumbs up. Arthur with the thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Hopefully all you had a Thanksgiving that was spent with family and friends and really good food. Omari, take it away, my guy.
Yeah, again, big thanks to everybody for joining us this Sunday. And big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to West Davenport, as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.